In the heart of the 1980s, the drug trade was rampant in Latin America, where one man built an empire of chaos and violence. With immense wealth and a web of loyalties, he became a symbol of fear and power, while everyone sought to bring him down. Join us on this thrilling journey as we explore the story of his incredible rise and dramatic fall, and the impact he left on communities and governments. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the dark world of drugs? Let's begin. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Americans were witnessing dramatic changes in culture and society. The country's economy was recovering from the oil crisis, but at the same time, drug use was spreading in major cities like New York and Miami. At the heart of this change, one name started to echo among smugglers: Pablo Escobar. Escobar was born in Colombia in 1949 to a poor family. From a young age, he dreamed of wealth and power. In his early years, he began his involvement in drug trafficking, as Colombia was producing massive amounts of cocaine. With growing demand in the United States, he established a vast smuggling network. During the 1980s, Escobar began extending his influence in the American market. He ran a well-organized trafficking operation through drug cartels and emerged as one of the largest suppliers of cocaine in the U.S. Escobar employed various tactics to eliminate competitors, including violence and intimidation, making his name synonymous with fear in the drug world. By 1982, authorities estimated that Escobar was earning around $70 million per day. As his wealth grew, Escobar started investing his money in legal ventures, such as building homes and schools in Colombia. He attempted to create the image of a successful businessman, but in reality, his fortune came from illegal activities. As his power and wealth increased, Escobar began boasting about his influence. He had significant control over the Colombian government and even threatened violence if his demands weren't met. Escobar used both weapons and money to buy the loyalty of politicians, further complicating the government's efforts to shut down his operations. While Escobar was expanding, American and Colombian security forces were closely monitoring his movements. However, there were obstacles as corruption and bribery often hindered investigations. Over time, though, things began to unravel. By the early 1980s, Pablo Escobar had become a central figure in the global drug trade. His base was in Colombia, but he was increasingly supplying markets in the United States, where cocaine was spreading at an alarming rate, causing widespread panic in American society. Escobar's influence grew significantly, and he began expanding his network to include friends and relatives from across Colombia. He formed the Medellín Cartel, which included many prominent traffickers who dominated the market. Escobar promoted the idea that he was not just a drug trafficker but a national figure, using advertisements and social projects to improve his image in Colombia. However, as his power grew, so did the violence. Escobar used brutal force to eliminate rivals and dissenters. In 1989, he carried out numerous assassinations targeting police officers, politicians, and journalists who were hindering his activities. One of the most notorious incidents was the assassination of Colombia's Justice Minister, Ruben Omar Diaz, who was determined to hold the cartels accountable. The U.S. government began to take Escobar's threat seriously. President Ronald Reagan's administration formed a special anti-drug unit, working with the Colombian government to coordinate efforts against Escobar. Yet, with his violent tactics, Escobar initially evaded capture and even expanded his power to unprecedented levels. In 1985, a bomb exploded in a multi-story building in Colombia, killing many innocent people. This was one of Escobar's most violent attacks, showcasing his willingness to go to extreme lengths to achieve his goals. At the same time, Colombians began to feel the weight of the escalating violence. As pressure mounted, Escobar also employed psychological strategies. He claimed to help the poor, earning him popularity among certain social groups. But in reality, it was all part of his plan to strengthen his power, using money and influence to secure loyalty from the community. With the rise in violence and increasing death toll, voices in Colombia began calling for action against Escobar and his cartel. However, the alliance between the U.S. and Colombian governments was complicated by widespread corruption within the government forces. With the start of the 1990s, things were heading toward a decisive turning point in the life of Pablo Escobar. After years of chaos and violence, the Colombian government, under increasing international pressure, began taking more decisive steps against the Medellín Cartel. There were intense efforts to gather intelligence and strengthen security operations, with significant support from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. In 1992, Colombia witnessed radical changes. A special unit known as the Combat Unit was formed, composed of the best police and military personnel, dedicated to hunting down Escobar. Their primary goal was to eliminate his influence and restore order to the country. As the pressure mounted, Escobar began to feel anxious. Arrests among his cartel members increased, forcing him into hiding. Life became unstable for him as he constantly moved from place to place, making it difficult for him to manage his operations. However, Escobar did not give up easily. In 1993, he still controlled a significant portion of the cocaine trade and even issued open threats to the government. Nonetheless, the Colombian and U.S. governments were determined to put an end to his activities. The end was near. On December 2, 1993, Escobar was cornered in an apartment in Medellín. Authorities were tipped off by an informant, leading to a massive raid. Meanwhile, Escobar and his associates attempted to escape across the rooftops. As Escobar tried to flee, a shootout ensued with special forces. The gunfire exchange lasted for a while until Escobar was fatally shot by security forces. He eventually fell, marking the tragic end of one of the most dangerous drug traffickers in the history of the Americas. He was 44 years old. Escobar's downfall wasn't just the end of one man, but a significant shift in the drug trade. After his death, the Medellín Cartel splintered, leading to the rise of new cartels. However, both the Colombian and U.S. governments realized the need to change their strategies. Anti-drug efforts evolved, and larger campaigns against drug trafficking began. While Escobar was gone, he left behind a complex legacy of violence and chaos. Colombian communities had suffered for years due to insecurity, but with the fall of the drug lord, some areas began to recover. Still, the drug trade persisted, but the lessons learned from the battle with Escobar helped governments improve their strategies. Pablo Escobar's story is a reminder of the complexities of the drug war and its impact on societies. His life was an example of power and wealth, but also a warning of the enormous human cost behind it.